Everything you have been told about your body is a comfortable lie. Every pill you swallow, every diagnosis you accept, is part of a carefully constructed illusion designed to keep you weak, dependent, and asleep. We are conditioned to believe that disease is a biological lottery, a cruel roll of the genetic dice where we are mere victims of circumstance. But what if the cure for the most incurable diseases didn't come from a pharmaceutical lab? What if it came from the stars? To understand the impossible, we must first ground ourselves in the absolute ordinary. There was nothing more ordinary, more grounded, or more logically sound than the life of Dr. James Mitchell. At 43 years old, James was a fixture in the quiet, cornstalked isolation of Cedar Falls, Iowa. He was not a mystic. He was not a guru selling false hope. He was a man of science, of blood, of mud, and of hard, cold facts. In Cedar Falls, James was known simply as the Fixer. He possessed a reputation that bordered on local legend, not because of some divine intervention, but because of his relentless competence. If your tractor engine seized up in the dead of winter, you called James. If your prize stallion was breech birthing at 2 a.m., you called James. He possessed a rare, almost supernatural mechanical empathy. He understood how systems worked, whether they were made of steel and pistons or flesh and bone. He could feel where the flow was broken. He could sense the blockage before the X-ray even confirmed it. He was the man who could make anything run again with just the touch. Fundamentally, James was a skeptic. He was a man built on logic and tangible evidence. He trusted what he could see, what he could touch, and what he could stitch back together with his own hands. To James, the universe was a machine, a complex, biological machine. Yes, but a machine nonetheless. If a part broke, you replaced it. If a system failed, you rebooted it with medicine or surgery. He had absolutely no patience for abstract spirituality or the woo-woo nonsense of energy healing that was starting to pervade the culture. He believed in antibiotics, he believed in surgery, and he believed in the tangible reality of the physical world. But the universe has a cruel, ironic sense of humor. It loves to take the men who believe they have everything figured out and shatter their reality into a million pieces. James Mitchell, the man who could fix anything, was the perfect candidate for a lesson that would dismantle his entire existence. He was the master of the physical realm, yet he was completely blind to the war being fought in the invisible. Behind the facade of the capable town hero, James Mitchell was a man slowly eroding from the inside out. His personal life had become a barren landscape, mirroring the frozen fields of an Iowa winter. The divorce 3 years prior had not been a screaming match, but a quiet, suffocating death of connection. He had retreated into his work, using the adrenaline of emergency surgeries and the exhaustion of 18-hour days as a shield against the silence of his empty house. He convinced himself that he didn't need people, that his purpose was solely found in the utility of his hands. But the universe has a way of stripping away our defenses, and for James, the attack did not come from the outside. It came from within the very vessel he inhabited. It began in the late autumn of 1982. It wasn't a sudden catastrophic event, but a slow, insidious creeping of rust in the machine. At first, it was just a heaviness in his limbs, a fatigue that sleep couldn't touch. Then came the fire in the joints. His fingers, the precise instruments of his trade, began to ache with a dull, throbbing rhythm that mocked his skill. He ignored it, pushed through it with caffeine and stubbornness, telling himself it was just age, just overwork. But the body keeps the score, and James was losing. The diagnosis, when it finally came, after months of humiliating tests and dismissive specialists, was a nebulous label, an aggressive, idiopathic autoimmune disorder. Idiopathic is the medical world's arrogant way of saying, we have no idea why this is happening. This was the ultimate betrayal. James had spent his life studying biology, trusting in the cause and effect relationship of physiology. He believed that if you treated the body right, it would serve you. But now, his own immune system, the defense force designed to protect him, had turned traitor. It was actively hunting down his healthy cells, mistaking his own tissues for foreign invaders. He was under siege, and the enemy was his own blood. He sought out the best rheumatologists in the state. He took the corticosteroids, the immunosuppressants, the pills that made his hair thin and his stomach churn. Nothing worked. The medication only masked the symptoms while the fire continued to burn beneath the surface. The irony was a bitter pill to swallow. Here he was, the fixer. The man who could look at a cow with a twisted stomach and know exactly where to cut. Yet he was powerless to stop his own disintegration. He would spend his days saving the lives of golden retrievers and farm cats, looking into the grateful eyes of their owners, accepting their praise, all while feeling like an absolute fraud. How could he profess to understand healing when he couldn't even heal himself? His faith in Western medicine, the very foundation of his intellectual life, began to crumble. He realized that modern medicine was excellent at emergency repair, at fixing broken bones and stitching wounds, but it was utterly incompetent when it came to chronic, systemic failure. It could keep you alive, but it couldn't make you whole. By November of 1984, James was at a breaking point. The pain was constant, a white noise in the background of his existence. The fatigue was a lead blanket dragging him down. He was isolated, physically broken, and spiritually bankrupt. The logic that had guided his life had led him to a dead end. He was a mechanic whose own engine was seizing, standing on the side of the road with no tools left in his box. He was hollowed out, his ego shattered, and unbeknownst to him, this state of total defeat was the exact prerequisite required for what was about to happen. He had to be emptied of his certainty before he could be filled with the truth. Fate does not announce itself with trumpets. It arrives in the silence of the dead hours, when the rest of the world is paralyzed by sleep. It was 3:22 a.m. on November 14th, 1984. The world was dark, wrapped in the freezing embrace of an early Iowa winter. James Mitchell was steering his battered pickup truck down the gravel driveway of his clinic, his body screaming in protest. He had just spent 4 grueling hours at the Miller farm, treating a prize quarter horse for a severe case of liver flukes. His hands were stiff, his knuckles swollen and throbbing with the familiar autoimmune fire, and his mind was a fog of exhaustion. He wanted nothing more than to collapse into a dreamless sleep and forget the pain of his existence for a few hours. But the universe had other plans. As the headlights swept across the familiar wooden siding of his veterinary clinic, something caught his eye. It was an anomaly in the pattern of the night, a shadow where no shadow should be, huddled against the stack of hay bales near the rear entrance. James killed the engine, and the sudden silence of the countryside rushed in, heavy and oppressive. His first instinct was annoyance. It wasn't uncommon for drifters or intoxicated teenagers to seek shelter near the warmth of the clinic's generator. He sighed, the breath pluming in the frigid air, and reached for the heavy maglite flashlight he kept under the seat. He prepared himself for a confrontation, rehearsing the speech to tell whoever it was to move along. He stepped out of the truck, his boots crunching on the frost-hardened ground. "Hey," he called out, his voice raspy. "You can't be back here. This is private property." The figure didn't move. It remained hunched over, shivering violently, wrapped in something that looked like a metallic, shimmering fabric too thin for the weather, too strange for Cedar Falls. As James drew closer, the beam of his flashlight cut through the darkness, illuminating the intruder. The irritation in James's chest evaporated, replaced instantly by a primal, cold dread that started at the base of his spine. This was not a drunk. This was not a vagrant. The anatomy was wrong. The proportions were impossible. The figure was slight, almost fragile, with limbs that seemed too long and a head that was slightly too large for its frame. It was curled in a fetal position, clutching its side. James, the man of science, tried to categorize what he was seeing, but his database returned 0 results. He took a step closer, driven by a morbid curiosity that overrode his fear. The creature turned its head. The light caught its eyes, large, dark, and filled with a depth of intelligence and suffering that no animal possessed, but it was the ground that held James's attention. Beside the creature, pooling on the frozen earth and staining the yellow hay, was a liquid. It wasn't the bright crimson of oxygenated human blood. It was a dark, viscous violet, thick and sticky like motor oil, shimmering with a faint, impossible luminescence. James froze. The wind howled through the cornfields, but in that moment, the entire world seemed to stop. He was looking at something that shattered the laws of biology he had worshipped his entire life. He was standing on the precipice of the unknown, and unlike every other time in his life, he had no manual to guide him. The choice he was about to make would not just change his life, it would rewrite the history of human health. The logical mind screamed run. The reptilian brain screamed predator. But James Mitchell listened to neither. Deep beneath the layers of his skepticism and his exhaustion lay a core frequency that defined his very soul. Compassion. It was the same instinct that made him drive through blizzards to deliver calves. The same impulse that made him stay up all night with a dying foal. He looked at the shivering, bleeding entity before him, and he didn't see a monster. He saw a patient, in a moment that defied every survival instinct programmed into the human genome. James dropped the flashlight, knelt in the freezing mud, and offered his hand. He expected the creature to recoil, perhaps to attack. Instead, it looked up with those vast, liquid eyes, and James felt a sudden, bizarre sensation of recognition, not visual, but energetic. It was a plea for help, so loud it almost rang in his ears. "Easy now," James whispered, his voice trembling only slightly. "Let's get you out of the cold." He slid his arms under the creature's frame. It was shockingly light, its bone structure feeling like hollow avian bones wrapped in dense, wiry muscle. He lifted the being, the violet fluid slick and warm against his coat, and carried it into the sterile white glare of the clinic dot inside. The reality of the situation hit him with the force of a physical blow. Under the fluorescent lights, the patient was undeniably extraterrestrial. Grey-blue skin, for long tapered fingers, and no visible nose. But James, the veterinarian, took over. He laid the creature on the stainless steel examination table. The wound was severe, jagged laceration across the abdomen, leaking that dark, viscous fluid at an alarming rate. Standard sutures would tear through this skin. It was too porous, too different. He needed a seal. He needed to stop the leak immediately. The creature's eyes locked onto James, tracking his panic. Then, a thought clear calm and utterly alien bloomed in James's mind. It wasn't spoken. It was implanted. You are a fixer. I see the tools in your mind. You understand structure. James paused, staring at the being. The voice was inside his head. Shaking off the shock, he realized the creature was right. He was a fixer. He ran to the supply cabinet, bypassing the medical sutures, and grabbed a tube of industrial-grade surgical epoxy and a roll of sterile, non-stick mesh. "This is going to sting," James muttered, reverting to his bedside manner as if speaking to a frightened dog. He cleaned the wound with Selena Gamble, but a necessary one. The creature flinched but remained still. James worked with the precision of a master craftsman. He applied the mesh, bridging the gap of the alien flesh, and sealed it with the rapid-setting epoxy. It was crude, it was unorthodox, and it was brilliant. The violet flow stopped. The seal held. James stepped back, his hands covered in the blood of a star traveler, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He had just performed surgery on an alien using glue and gauze. He had saved its life, and in doing so, he had unknowingly signed a contract with the cosmos. The silence in the clinic was absolute, yet the room was filled with a conversation louder than any scream. James washed his hands at the sink, the water turning pink as it rinsed away the alien fluid. He watched the creature in the reflection of the window. It hadn't moved its mouth. It had no lips to form words, no vocal cords to vibrate the air. Yet James knew exactly what it was thinking. The communication wasn't language. It was a direct download of pure meaning. It bypassed the clumsy filter of English and arrived in his consciousness as fully formed concepts, sharper and more undeniable than spoken words. It felt like remembering something you didn't know you had forgotten. "You were confused by the physics of my biology." The voice echoed in James's skull. It wasn't a hallucination. It resonated in the frontal lobe, vibrating with a specific frequency that made James's teeth ache slightly. He turned around, drying his hands on a towel, his heart hammering against his ribs. "What are you?" James asked aloud, his voice sounding small and jagged in the sterile room. "Are you an angel, a demon?" These were the only categories his Midwestern upbringing could offer for something this inexplicable. The creature's eyes blinked a sideways motion of an inner membrane. A ripple of amusement, dry and ancient, washed over James's mind. "We are not your myths," the voice replied. "We are biology. We are evolution. We are observers." The entity projected a name into James's mind, a complex geometric sound that was unpronounceable by a human tongue. "For your convenience, you may interpret my frequency as Kyle." It was absurd. An alien named Kyle. But the gravity of the presence in the room crushed any urge to laugh. Kyle sat up slowly, testing the repair James had made. The epoxy held. The pain signals in the room diminished. James could actually feel the creature's pain subsiding, as if their nervous systems were momentarily bridged. "You acted against your logic," Kyle projected. "You calculated the risk, the fear of the unknown, the biological threatened, yet you chose the action of preservation. You saved a vessel that does not belong to your world." The creature swung its legs off the table and stood, towering over the doctor. "In the physics of the cosmos, energy cannot be destroyed, only transferred. You have expended life force to restore mine. This creates an imbalance, a vacuum." James stepped back, gripping the counter. "I don't want anything. I couldn't let you die." "That is irrelevant," Kyle interrupted, the mental voice carrying the weight of a gavel strike. The law of equilibrium is absolute. A sacred debt has been forged. I cannot offer you gold, for it is dirt. I cannot offer you power, for it is fleeting. But I can offer you the only currency that holds value across the stars. The creature stepped closer, its dark eyes drilling into James's soul. I will pay you with truth. I see the decay inside you, James Mitchell. I see the war you are losing. James instinctively stiffened. He had spent years perfecting the art of concealing his pain, wearing a mask of stoicism that fooled his ex-wife, his colleagues, and even himself. But standing before this being, he felt stripped naked. There were no secrets here. Kyle didn't look at James's body. He looked through it, scanning the energetic blueprint like an architect reviewing a flawed schematic. The creature raised a long slate-grey finger and pointed not at James's swollen joints, but at the center of his chest, right where the heavy knot of anxiety had lived for 3 years. You carry a blockage, Kyle observed, the thought transmitting with clinical detachment. It is old. It is calcified. It is unnecessary suffering. It's an autoimmune disease, James snapped, defensive reflexes kicking in. My immune system is overactive. It's genetic. It's just bad luck. He tried to retreat into the safety of medical terminology, the Latin words that categorized his pain without explaining it. Incorrect. The alien consciousness cut through the excuse like a laser. Your body is not flawed. It is not making a mistake. It is reacting perfectly to the instructions you are giving it. Kyle moved closer, the air around him humming with static. You believe your immune system is attacking your healthy tissue. This is a primitive understanding. Your immune system is attacking the energy of the trauma you have stored in those tissues. It is trying to burn out the frequency of your grief. James felt the blood drain from his face. The grief, the divorce, the nights sitting in the dark, staring at the wall, replaying every failure, every harsh word. He had swallowed that poison day after day, thinking it had nowhere to go. You think thoughts are silent, Kyle continued, relentless. But to your cells, thoughts are commands. For 3 cycles of your sun, you have broadcast a signal of self-destruction. You have told your body that you are isolated, that you are unworthy, that you are broken. Your cells are simply obeying the master. The inflammation is not a disease, James. It is a physical manifestation of your emotional suicide. The truth hit James harder than the diagnosis ever had. He wasn't a victim of his body. He was the perpetrator. His illness was the physical echo of his spirit screaming for help. I can repair the immediate damage. Kyle proposed, his large eyes narrowing. I can dissolve the energetic cyst that is strangling your vitality. I can reset the frequency. This is my payment for the life you saved. But there is a condition. If I clear the blockage, you must learn how not to rebuild it. You must understand the physics of what you call illness. Are you ready to see how your reality actually works? James looked at his twisted hands, then at the traveler. He nodded, and the lesson began. The veterinary clinic, usually a place of sterile smells and routine procedures, transformed that night into a classroom for the advanced physics of the soul. Kyle did not preach. He explained. He did not ask for faith. He demanded understanding. He moved around the small examination room, touching the familiar objects of James's life, the stainless steel table, the glass vials, the heavy wooden desk as if he were interacting with ghosts. To James, these things were solid matter. To Kyle, They were merely slow-moving light. You look at this table, Kyle projected, his hand passing hovering inches above the metal surface, and you see a solid barrier. You believe it is hard because your senses tell you it is hard. But this is the first illusion. If you were to look at this steel through the lens of my eyes, or through the lens of your own quantum microscopes, you would see that it is 99.9999% empty space. It is a cloud of electrons spinning round a nucleus, vibrating at a specific rate. It feels solid only because the frequency of the table is rejecting the frequency of your hand. It is not matter bumping into matter. It is energy repelling energy. James sat on the stool, his mind reeling. He knew the atomic theory, of course, but he had never applied it to his daily existence. He had treated the world as a collection of separate, solid objects, everything. Kyle continued, the mental voice expanding to fill the room is frequency. There is no such thing as matter. There is only energy vibrating at different speeds. The rock is slow energy. The light is fast energy. And your thoughts are the fastest energy of all. This is the fundamental law you have forgotten. The universe does not speak English. It speaks frequency. The alien turned to James, his dark eyes shimmering. You ask about God. You ask about the source. In your culture, you have painted a picture of a man in the sky, a judge who sits on a throne and decides who is good and who is bad. This is a child's drawing. There is no man. There is only the field. Kyle explained that what humans call God or the universe is actually a vast, infinite field of intelligent consciousness. It is the canvas upon which reality is painted. It is a frequency of pure potential, vibrating at the level of unconditional love and creation. It is not outside of James. It is the very fabric of the space between his atoms. Your brain, Kyle gestured to James's head, is not the generator of your consciousness. This is the mistake of your medical science. You think the brain creates the mind, just as a generator creates electricity. You are wrong. Your brain is a receiver. It is a biological antenna. It is a filter. The analogy Kyle implanted was vivid. Imagine the air is filled with hundreds of radio waves, jazz, classical news, static. The radio box does not create the music. It simply tunes into the frequency that already exists. If the radio breaks, the music doesn't die. The signal is still there, but the vessel can no longer express it. You are a divine consciousness streaming through a biological suit, Kyle said. When your body dies, the signal does not end. It simply returns to the source. But while you are here, your brain determines which station you listen to. And this, James, is where you have built your own prison. The conversation shifted to the concepts of heaven and hell, stripping them of their religious dogma and revealing their energetic mechanics. Heaven and hell are not geography. Kyle stated with absolute certainty. You do not go to hell when you die. You are living in it right now. Hell is a frequency. It is the vibrational state of fear, anger, guilt, and shame. These are slow, dense, heavy waves. When you dwell in the memory of your divorce, when you swim in the guilt of your isolation, you are tuning your biological radio to the hell station. You are literally bathing your cells in a low-frequency broadcast that degrades your DNA. James thought of the last 3 years, the bitter loops of thought, the constant replay of his failures. He realized he had been tuning into that station every single morning, voluntarily. And heaven, Kyle countered, is the frequency of high oscillation. Gratitude, joy, compassion, love. These are not just poetic words. They are measurable, high-speed wavelengths. When you saved me tonight, you momentarily switched your dial. You stopped thinking about your pain and focused on compassion. You tuned into the heaven frequency. That is why you felt strong enough to carry me. For a moment, you aligned with the source. This led to the final, most crushing realization, the law of attraction. James had always dismissed it as New Age fluff, but Kyle explained it as the physics of the Anunnaki. The ancient knowledge that had been suppressed. Like attracts like, Kyle explained. This is not magic. It is magnetic resonance. If you hold a tuning fork of the note C and strike it, every other C string in the room will vibrate. They cannot help it. It is physics. You, James, are a tuning fork. For years, you have been vibrating at the frequency of I am sick, I am lonely, I am betrayed. The universe, which is a giant mirror, has no choice but to reflect that back to you. You have attracted this illness because your vibration demanded it. James protested weakly. I didn't ask for this pain. Your conscious mind said no, but your energy field screamed yes, Kyle corrected. The universe does not hear what you say. It feels what you are. You cannot fake your frequency. You have been broadcasting a signal of victimhood, and the cells of your body, loyal servants that they are, rearrange themselves to match that signal. You created this reality, brick by brick, thought by thought, and because you built it, only you can dismantle it. The weight of this truth was suffocating, yet strangely liberating. If James was the architect of his own hell, that meant he held the blueprints. He wasn't a victim of a random genetic accident. He was a powerful creator who had been using his power in reverse. He had been using the divine tool of creation to destroy himself. The medical industry wants you to believe you are a machine that breaks randomly. Kyle concluded this part of the lesson, his voice softening, because if you are a broken machine, you need a mechanic. You need them. You need their pills. But if you are a creator who has merely forgotten how to tune his instrument, then you need nothing but awareness. You are free. And that is why they hide this truth. A human who knows he is the source of his own reality is a human who cannot be controlled. James looked down at his hands, the hands of a fixer. For the first time, he saw them not just as tools for repairing flesh, but as ones capable of directing energy. The world of solid matter had dissolved around him. The walls of the clinic felt porous. He was no longer just a veterinarian in Iowa. He was a consciousness floating in a sea of infinite vibration, finally learning how to swim. Illness is never a mistake, Kyle's voice resonated, slicing through the quiet hum of the clinic's refrigerator. And it is never, ever random. This is the lie that keeps your species in chains. James shifted uncomfortably on his stool. As a medical professional, his entire career was built on the premise that disease was an invading army bacteria, viruses, genetic mutations that attacked the innocent. To hear that illness was not an attack, but a creation, was offensive. It sounded like victim blaming. Are you saying children choose cancer? James asked, his voice thick with suppressed anger. Are you saying I chose to be in this pain? I am saying you are a musical instrument playing a discordant note. Kyle replied, his tone devoid of judgment, pure observation. In the physics of the cosmos, disease is defined as dissonance. It is what happens when the frequency of your body drops so low that it can no longer sustain the structure of health. You do not catch a disease like you catch a baseball. You become compatible with it. You vibrate at the same level as the virus or the mutation, and so you invite it in to dance. Kyle moved to the whiteboard on the wall, where James usually wrote surgery schedules. With a long finger, he didn't write words. He drew a waveformer, chaotic, jagged line. This is your energy field, Kyle explained. For years, you have carried a specific frequency, guilt. The guilt of a failed marriage. The guilt of not being enough. The guilt of isolation. Guilt is a heavy, dense vibration. It settles in the joints. It clogs the fascia. It turns the fluid of your cells into sludge. He pointed to James's swollen hands. Your medical books call this autoimmune disease. They say the body is confused, attacking itself. This is a fairy tale for children. The body is infinitely intelligent. It never makes a mistake. Your immune system is not attacking you. It is attacking the foreign energy you have stored within your tissues. It is trying to burn out the guilt you have swallowed. The inflammation is the heat of that battle. Your soul is trying to evict your ego's trauma, and your body is the battlefield. This concept, the conflict between soul and personality, was the master key. Kyle explained that every human has two aspects. The soul, which seeks expansion, love, and connection, and the personality or ego, which seeks safety, control, and often wallows in fear. When these two are in alignment, health is the natural result. But when they are at war, the soul wants to move forward, but the personality clings to the past. The friction creates heat. That heat is inflammation. That friction is disease. You are a fixer, Kyle observed, piercing James's identity. You have sworn a silent vow, a contract written in your subconscious, that you must carry the burdens of others to justify your existence. You believe that if you are not suffering, you are not serving. This is a karmic vow of martyrdom. It is an ancient program running in your DNA. Your illness is simply the physical manifestation of this vow. You are destroying your own vehicle because you believe you are unworthy of a smooth ride. James felt a lump form in his throat. It was true. He felt guilty when he rested. He felt selfish when he was happy. He had equated love with sacrifice, and this, Kyle turned, his eyes narrowing, is what your planet's healers will never tell you. Not because they are evil, but because they are blind. Or, in the case of the powerful, because they are profitable. The conversation shifted to the medical-industrial complex. Kyle painted a chilling picture of Earth's healthcare system. It was a system designed for disease management, not health creation. Think, James, the alien urged. If every human knew that they could heal their own bodies by changing their frequency, by releasing trauma and breathing intention into their cells, what would happen to the economy? Trillions of dollars in pharmaceuticals, surgeries, and hospital stays would vanish overnight. A healed patient is a lost customer. James thought of the drawers full of pills in his pharmacy. He thought of the reps who came by with free lunches and glossy brochures, pushing the latest suppressants. They treat the smoke, Kyle said, and ignore the fire. They give you a pill to stop the pain signal, the smoke, but they leave the burning trauma, the fire raging in the basement. They tell you that you are a victim of your genes. They tell you that you are powerless. This is the greatest spell ever cast on humanity. It keeps you small. It keeps you frightened. And a frightened human is easy to control. Your genes are not your destiny, Kyle continued, shattering the final pillar of James's medical worldview. Genes are blueprints, but you are the contractor. You decide which blueprints get built. This is epigenetics, a science your people are just beginning to stumble upon. Your environment controls your genes, and your internal environment, your thoughts, your emotions, your beliefs, is the most powerful signal of all. You can turn off the gene for cancer. You can turn off the gene for arthritis. You are the master of the genetic switchboard. James looked at his hands again. For the first time in years, he didn't see them as betrayers. He saw them as obedient servants, exhausted from fighting a war he had ordered them to fight. He had been commanding his body to die unconsciously every single day. So, James whispered, the reality of his responsibility settling on his shoulders like a heavy cloak. I did this. I built this cage. Yes, Kyle confirmed, his voice softening with unexpected gentleness. You built the cage, which means you are the only one who holds the key to open it. The doctors cannot save you. The pills cannot save you. Only the architect can renovate the house. Are you ready to pick up the hammer, James? Or do you prefer the comfort of the ruin? So how do I fix it? James asked, his voice trembling with a mix of desperation and hope. He instinctively glanced toward the cabinet where he kept the surgical steel, the syringes, and the laser therapy unit. Do you have a device? A machine on your ship? Kyle made a sound that might have been a laugh, or perhaps a sigh of pity. You are obsessed with hardware, the thought echoed. You believe technology must be made of metal and plastic. You believe it must plug into a wall. This is the primitive thinking of a species that has barely left its cradle. The most advanced technology in the universe is not a machine. It is a frequency. And you call this frequency love. James blinked. Love. You're telling me the cure for an autoimmune disorder is love? The skepticism was creeping back in. It sounded too simple, too soft. It sounded like a greeting card, not a medical protocol. Do not mistake the carrier wave for the content, Kyle corrected sharply. I am not speaking of the chemical reaction you feel for a mate or the attachment you feel for a pet. That is biology. I am speaking of universal love. In the physics of the cosmos, love is the highest vibratory rate of existence. It is the frequency of absolute order. Chaos cannot exist in the presence of this frequency. Disease is chaos, it is cells vibrating out of harmony. Love is the conductor that snaps the orchestra back into rhythm. Kyle explained that what humans witness as miracles, the spontaneous remission, the faith healings, the works of ancient masters like Yeshua, Jesus, were not magic. They were applied physics. When a master heals instantly, Kyle continued, they are not breaking the laws of physics. They are applying a higher law. They are generating a field of such intense, coherent energy love that the entropy disease in the patient's body simply collapses. They are reorganizing the molecular structure of the flesh by imposing a higher order upon it. You have this capacity, James. Every human does. But you have forgotten how to turn on the generator. The alien moved to the sink and turned on the tap. Water rushed out, swirling into the drain. Your scientists call 97% of your DNA junk DNA, Kyle said, watching the water flow. Think about the arrogance of that statement. Nature, which is ruthless in its efficiency, would not carry 97% useless weight for millions of years. That junk is not junk. It is the library of the gods. It is the dormant software of your potential. It contains the instructions for telepathy, for self-repair, for extreme longevity. But it is encrypted, and the password is intent. Kyle turned off the tap and faced James. You can activate this DNA. The mechanism is simple. yet you ignore it 20,000 times a day. It is the breath. He explained that breath is the bridge between the conscious mind and the autonomic nervous system. By controlling the breaths specifically through rhythmic, deep patterns, humans can manually override the fight or flight stress signals that keep their bodies in a state of acidic inflammation. When you breathe with intention, Kyle taught, you are not just moving air. You are moving prana life, force energy. If you combine a specific breath pattern with a visualized emotion of gratitude, you create a laser beam of signal. You can direct this beam to your joints. You can tell the DNA in your hands to wake up. You can tell the inflammation to recede. This is not poetry. This is command line coding for your biology. Then, Kyle pointed to the glass of water sitting on James's desk. And finally, there is the medium. You are 70% water, James. Your brain, your blood, your tissues, mostly water. And water is the most programmable substance in the universe. Kyle revealed the secret of water memory. He explained that water molecules are like liquid crystals. They can store information. If you drink water while feeling anger, Kyle warned, you are drinking poison. The water structures itself into chaotic patterns that disrupt your cells. But if you hold this glass, Kyle gestured, and you project the frequency of gratitude into it for 60 seconds, you truly feel the thanks for your healing. Before it happens, the water will restructure. It becomes a liquid medicine. When you drink it, you are flooding your system with the geometry of health. You literally wash your cells with the information of healing. James stared at the glass of water. It looked the same as it had 10 minutes ago, but now it felt ... alive. He realized he had been drinking dead water his whole life, water stripped of its spirit, just as he had been living a life stripped of its magic. You have been looking for a cure out there, Kyle concluded, tapping James's chest. In a pill, in a surgery, in a doctor. But the technology has been inside you the whole time. Your heart is the generator. Your brain is the tuner. Your breath is the switch. And the water is the delivery system. You are a self-contained, self-repairing, organic starship. Stop waiting for a mechanic and learn to fly the ship. James reached out and took the glass. His hand shook, not from pain this time, but from the vertigo of a paradigm shift. He held the water. He closed his eyes. He didn't just think the word thank you. He tried to feel it, to summon the emotion of relief he would feel if the pain were already gone. He projected that feeling into the glass. It was awkward at first, like trying to flex a muscle he had never used. But then he felt a subtle shift of warmth, a tingling in his palms. He drank. The water tasted ... sweeter, rounder, or maybe it was just his imagination. Imagination, Kyle's voice whispered in his mind, is just the preview of reality coming into focus. Keep drinking. The hardest part of healing, Kyle transmitted, his mental voice dropping an octave, becoming heavier, denser, is not the breathing. It is not the water. It is not the discipline of the mind. The hardest part, James, is admitting that you love your cage. James recoiled, as if slapped. I hate this pain, he spat back. I hate being alone. How can you say I love it? Because it is safe, Kyle countered instantly. As long as you are a victim, you are innocent. If your ex-wife is the villain, you don't have to look at your own coldness. If your genetics are the villain, you don't have to change your lifestyle. Being a victim is the ultimate comfort zone. It allows you to complain, to seek pity, and to abdicate your power. You have built an identity around your suffering. If I took away your pain right now, who would you be? You would just be a man who has wasted 3 years of his life. And that is a truth too painful for your ego to bear. The words cut deep, slicing through the layers of self-pity James had wrapped around himself like a warm blanket. He realized that Kyle was right. He wore his autoimmune survivor badge with a twisted sort of pride. It made him special. It gave him an excuse to say no to life. You must understand the mechanics of victimhood, Kyle continued, pacing the small room. When you declare, I am a victim, you are sending a command code to the universe that says, I have no power. The universe, which is a giant compliance machine, says, agreed, and it strips you of your influence. You become a leaf in the wind, tossed around by every external circumstance. You become a magnetized target for misfortune. Kyle then leaned in close, his alien face inches from James, and it gets darker. In the cosmos, energy is food. There are entities, forms of consciousness that vibrate at very low frequencies, that feed on the energy of fear, despair, and powerlessness. Your religious texts call them demons or fallen angels. We call them parasitic constructs. They are not monsters with pitchforks. They are energetic leeches. When you sit in your house, wallowing in self-pity, replaying your trauma, you are ringing a dinner bell. You are turning yourself into a vibrational buffet. You are literally feeding the darkness that consumes you. A chill ran down James's spine. The idea that his depression was not just a chemical imbalance, but a signal that invited predation was terrifying. This is why you feel drained, Kyle explained. This is why the more you complain, the weaker you get. You are leaking your life force to sustain these lower frequencies. You have created a personal hell, and you have invited the residents to move in. James slumped against the counter. So, I'm doing this to myself. It's all my fault. Stop, Kyle commanded. Fault is a low-frequency concept. It implies judgment. Replace it with responsibility. Responsibility simply means the ability to respond. This is the good news, James. If you are the one making yourself sick, that means you are powerful. You are so powerful that you have managed to override the survival instinct of your own body. You have created a devastating physical reality with your mind. Do you see? The same engine that drives you into the ditch can drive you up the mountain. You just have to put it in a different gear. The alien offered a new perspective on power dynamics. You are not a cork bobbing in the ocean. You are the ocean. You have believed the lie that you are small, fragile, and at the mercy of the world. The truth is that the world is at the mercy of your frequency. If you decide, right now, to reclaim your sovereignty, if you decide that you are the master of your biology, the guardian of your thoughts, the parasites will starve. The disease will have no soil in which to grow. But you must choose. You must choose to be a creator, which is terrifying, because a creator has no one to blame. James looked at the clock on the wall. It was for 15 a.m., the darkest part of the night. But inside him, a dawn was breaking. The crushing weight of why me was lifting, replaced by the terrifying, exhilarating weight of it's up to me. He realized he had been waiting for a savior, doctor, a new wife, a pill, or God himself to swoop down and fix his life. But the being in front of him, the literal savior from the stars, was telling him the one thing he didn't expect to hear. There are no saviors. There are only teachers. You have to save yourself. This is the threshold, Kyle whispered, his mental voice gentle now. You can go back to being the victim. It is easy. You can take your pills and blame your genes and die a slow, respectable death. Or you can step into the fire of self-responsibility. You can claim your power. It will be hard. It will require vigilance, but it is the only path that leads to the stars. What do you choose, James Mitchell? James straightened his back. The pain in his joints was still there, screaming, but for the first time in years. The scream didn't sound like a death sentence. It sounded like a wake-up call. I choose power, he whispered. I choose to heal. Theory is a map. Practice is the terrain. Understanding the physics of healing is one thing, but actually overriding 40 years of biological programming is another. The sun was beginning to bleed a pale grey light through the clinic windows, casting long shadows across the floor. The alien Kyle did not let James sleep. There was no time. The sacred debt had to be settled before the ship's departure. The mechanism is simple, Kyle instructed, his mental voice taking on the cadence of a metronome. But it requires a focus you have never exercised. You must decouple your consciousness from the pain in your hands and anchor it in the breath. Kyle taught James a technique he called the geometric breath. It wasn't just inhaling and exhaling. It was a visualization of geometry. Inhale for a count of 5, Kyle guided. As you pull the air in, visualize a stream of golden white light entering the crown of your head, traveling down your spine and lighting up every cell. This is high-frequency data. Hold for 5. In this pause, see the light expanding, pushing against the walls of your skin. Exhale for 5. As you push the air out, visualize grey smoke leaving your pores. This is the entropy. This is the waste. This is the fear. James sat on his stool, eyes closed. At first, his mind wandered. He thought about the cold coffee, the appointments he had later that day. But Kyle snapped him back. Focus. Your mind is a wild dog. Heal it. James tried again. Inhale, light. Hold, expansion. Exhale, smoke. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. Slowly, the throbbing in his knuckles began to recede, not because the inflammation was gone, but because his consciousness was no longer feeding it. He felt a hum, a vibration in his solar plexus that was entirely new. Now, Kyle said, pointing to the corner of the room where the clinic's backup generator hummed with an irregular, grinding rattle. It had been failing for weeks, a mechanical arrhythmia that James had meant to fix with a wrench. Fix it without tools. That's a machine, James argued. It has a loose belt or a dirty carburetor. Breathing at it won't help. Everything is frequency, Kyle repeated sternly. The metal of that generator is just dense energy. The electricity flowing through it is fluid. It is currently in a state of dissonance. Lend it your coherence. Place your hands on the casing. Do not try to move the parts physically. Visualize the perfect flow of electrons. Impose the blueprint of order upon the chaos. Feeling foolish, James walked over to the rattling machine. He placed his swollen hands on the cold metal housing. He could feel the jagged vibration of the malfunction. He closed his eyes. He stopped trying to diagnose the mechanical fault and instead focused on the feeling of a smooth-running engine, the hum of perfect efficiency. He used the breath. Inhale order, exhale chaos. He pushed his intention into the machine, imagining the metal relaxing, the friction vanishing. For a minute, nothing happened. Then, the grinding noise hit. James felt a surge of heat travel from his palms into the casing. Suddenly, the rhythm of the generator shifted. The rattle smoothed out. The erratic coughing settled into a steady, rhythmic purr. James pulled his hands back as if burned. He stared at the machine. He hadn't turned a screw. He hadn't replaced a part. He had simply altered the vibrational environment of the device. You see, Kyle noted, unimpressed by what James considered a miracle. You aligned the field. Matter merely followed. The real test came an hour later when Mrs. Higgins brought in her elderly beagle, Barnaby. The dog was lethargic, refusing to eat. Usually, James would have reached for the thermometer and the stethoscope. Today, he paused. He took a breath, activating the light, and reached out with his feeling hand. Before he even touched the dog's fur, he felt a patch of intense heat radiating from the animal's lower abdomen, prickly, angry static in the air. "He has a blockage," James said quietly, before even palpating the stomach. "Right here in the intestines." He confirmed it with an X-ray 10 minutes later. A swallowed stone. James had felt the energetic disruption before the physical evidence was visible. He wasn't just a veterinarian anymore. He was becoming a medical intuitive. The skepticism that had armored his heart for decades cracked wide open, and the light of a new reality came flooding in. The alien, Kyle, did not stay forever. Like all great teachers, he provided the tools and then withdrew to let the student do the work. The ship eventually departed, disappearing into the pre-dawn sky like a reverse falling star, leaving James alone in the silence of the Iowa cornfields. But the silence was different now. It was no longer empty. It was pregnant with potential. The real work, the grinding, unglamorous warfare of self-transformation had just begun. And God, it was harder than any surgery James had ever performed. The first few days were a brutal detox. James realized that he was addicted to his own misery. His brain, wired for 43 years to scan for problems, panicked when he tried to focus on solutions. He would wake up, and the first thought would be, "My hands hurt." The old James would have followed that thought down the spiral. "My hands hurt, so I can't work well, so I'm useless, so I'm alone." The new James had to catch that thought by the throat before it could complete the circuit. He implemented the gratitude protocol Kyle had taught him. Every morning, before his feet hit the floor, James forced himself to lie still for 5 minutes. He visualized his hands as they were 10 years ago, strong, flexible, pain-free. He didn't just remember it. He summoned the feeling. He forced his brain to fire the chemical signals of relief and joy. He thanked his body for a healing that hadn't physically happened yet. It felt delusional at first. It felt like lying. But he remembered the physics. The universe doesn't know the difference between a memory and a visualization. It only reads the frequency. He was hacking the timeline, broadcasting a signal from a future where he was already healed, forcing his present biology to align with it. Then came the hardest battle, the divorce. This was the root of the autoimmune blockage Kyle had identified. James carried a mountain of guilt about the way his marriage had ended, the silence, the emotional unavailability. He had been punishing himself with isolation, and his body had been punishing him with inflammation. To heal his hands, he had to heal his history. He sat in his kitchen, the ghost of his ex-wife's memory sitting across from him. He practiced the forgiveness frequency. He realized that forgiveness wasn't about saying what happened was okay. It wasn't a moral pardon. It was a selfish act of energetic hygiene. Holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die, Kyle had said. James visualized the cord of black, tar-like energy connecting him to his past. With every exhale, he cut a strand. He whispered, "I release you. I release myself. The debt is paid." He did this until the tears stopped coming, until the memory of his divorce felt like a movie he had watched once, rather than a fire he was currently burning in. It wasn't a linear path. There were days when the pain roared back with a vengeance, days when he felt like a fool talking to his glass of water. The parasitic constructs, the old patterns of fear and victimhood fought back. They whispered that he was crazy, that he was just a lonely vet losing his mind. But James treated these thoughts like viruses. He observed them, labeled them low frequency, and refused to feed them. He replaced "I am hurting" with "I am healing." He replaced "I am alone" with "I am connected to the source." Slowly, imperceptibly at first, the tide turned. It wasn't a miracle cure where he woke up one day and did a back. It was a molecular restructuring. The mornings became easier. The fire in his joints cooled from a raging inferno to a manageable simmer. He noticed he was sleeping 6 hours, then 7. His energy, usually depleted by noon, lasted until evening. He wasn't just fixing the machine. He was upgrading the operating system. The most profound change was in his eyes. When he looked in the mirror, the dull, flat look of the victim was gone. In its place was a spark of dangerous, vibrant clarity. He realized he was no longer a passenger in his own body. He was the captain. He had stopped reacting to the weather and started controlling the climate. The physical healing was just a side effect. The real miracle was that James Mitchell had finally decided to live. James Mitchell did not sell his clinic. He did not shave his head, buy a robe, or move to an ashram in the Himalayas. That would have been the easy way, out and escape into the spiritual clouds. But Kyle had taught him that true spirituality is not about leaving the world. It is about bringing a higher frequency down into the mud of the world. James realized that his mission field was exactly where he stood, amidst the smell of antiseptic, dog food, and Iowa soil. He was to remain a veterinarian, but he would no longer be a mere mechanic of flesh. He was accepting a new title, one that wasn't printed on his diploma, conscious healer. He became a bridge. On one side, he held the scalpel, the antibiotic, and the X-ray machine, the necessary tools of the physical dimension. On the other side, he held the intention, the breath, and the focused energy of the quantum field. He stopped seeing these two worlds as enemies. He realized that Western medicine was the hardware and consciousness was the software. Without the software, the hardware was just a blunt instrument. The change in his practice was subtle to the eye, but deafening to the soul. When he'd vaccinated a puppy, he didn't just inject the liquid. He visualized a shield of golden light wrapping around the animal's immune system. When he performed surgery, he held the intention of perfect reconstruction in his mind, guiding his hands with a flow that felt less like labor and more like a dance. The animals felt it. The clinic, once a place of high anxiety and barking fear, became strangely quiet. Animals that were usually aggressive would calm down the moment James walked into the room. They could sense the coherence of his field. They were responding to the heaven frequency he was broadcasting. James understood that he was now an interfacer bioterminal, connecting the intelligence of the planet with the consciousness of humanity. He realized that by healing himself and holding this frequency for his patients, he was doing work for the collective. Every time he chose peace over stress, He was adding a drop of clear water to the muddy ocean of human consciousness. He wasn't just fixing dogs. He was repairing the fabric of reality in his own small corner of the grid. He also learned the law of resonance regarding other people. In the beginning, he wanted to shake his clients, to grab people on the street and scream, "You don't have to be sick. It's all in your mind." But he remembered Kyle's warning. You cannot wake a person who is pretending to be asleep. Proselytizing would only create resistance. So, James chose the path of the lighthouse. A lighthouse doesn't run around the island looking for boats to save. It just stands there and shines. He let his results speak. People in Cedar Falls started to notice. They noticed that the fixer looked 10 years younger. They noticed that his chronic limp was gone. They noticed that when they were around him, they felt a strange sense of peace, a lifting of their own heavy burdens. Clients started coming in not just for their pets, but to talk, to sit in the waiting room a little longer than necessary. James had become a tuning fork. By simply maintaining his own high vibration, he was inviting everyone around him to tune up. He didn't need to convince the skeptics. He just needed to be the evidence. He had accepted the ultimate mission, to be in the world, but not of the frequency of the world. The departure, when it came, was not a spectacle of fire and thunder. It was as quiet as falling snow. 3 nights after his arrival, Kyle stood up from the makeshift cot in the back room. The crude epoxy patch James had applied was gone. In its place was smooth, unbroken grey skin. The alien had accelerated his own cellular regeneration using the very principles he had taught James. The ship, hidden in the cornfield under a cloak of light-bending frequency, had signaled its readiness. James walked Kyle to the back door. The air was frigid, biting at James's exposed face. But for the first time in years, he didn't feel the cold seeping into his bones. His internal fire was lit. "You will look for proof tomorrow," Kyle projected, his mental voice fading, sounding like a radio signal moving out of range. "You will look for footprints in the mud. You will look for a piece of metal. You will want something to show the world. You will find nothing." "They won't believe me," James said, watching the stars shimmer above. "Belief is not required," Kyle replied. "Resonance is. The truth is always available, hovering just above the frequency of fear, waiting for anyone brave enough to tune in." The alien turned his large, dark eyes to James one last time. "Do not try to save the world, James. Just keep your own frequency clear. A clear signal travels infinite distances." With that, Kyle stepped into the darkness of the field. There was no beam of light, no engine roar. The air simply shimmered, like heat rising from asphalt in the summer. There was a low-frequency thrum that vibrated in James's teeth, a sudden compression of the atmosphere, and then ... silence. Empty space. James walked to the spot where the ship had been. The snow was undisturbed. There were no burn marks, no landing gear indentations. A skeptic would say it was a hallucination brought on by stress and autoimmune fever. A materialist would say James had finally cracked. But James looked down at his hands, the hands that had been clawed and swollen for 3 years. They were open. They were steady. The pain was gone. The physical world had left no trace, but the molecular change within him was permanent. He was the evidence. What James Mitchell learned in the frozen silence of an Iowa winter was not just a story about aliens. It was a manual for human evolution. If we strip away the narrative, we are left with 3 non-negotiable laws of cosmic biology. These are the truths that the medical industry is too afraid or too ignorant to teach you. Lesson 1. Health is resonance, not luck. You must stop believing the lie that you are a victim of your genetics. Your DNA is not a dictator. It is a library. You are the librarian. You choose which books to pull off the shelf. Disease is not a random lightning strike. It is a physical manifestation of a low-frequency vibration. If you spend your days vibrating in the frequencies of fear, anger, and victimhood, you are biologically engineering your own destruction. Your body is a loyal servant. If you scream, "I am broken," into the void, your cells will break themselves to align with your command. You are the co-creator of your condition. Lesson 2. Love is advanced technology. We have been conditioned to think of love as a soft, sentimental emotion suitable for poetry, but useless in a hospital. This is a fatal error. In the higher physics of the universe, love is the most coherent, powerful energy field in existence. It is the force that holds atoms together. The ability to miraculously heal, to reorganize diseased tissue into healthy tissue instantly is not magic. It is the application of high-frequency intention. Your heart is a scalar wave generator. Your breath is the activation switch. You possess technology inside your ribcage that is more advanced than any machine on Earth, but you have left it unplugged. Lesson 3. You must excavate the shadow. You cannot heal the body while the soul is at war. Most chronic illness is simply the physical shadow of spiritual friction. It is the heat generated when your ego fights your soul. To heal, you must do the dirty work. You must go into the basement of your psyche and clean out the rot, the grudges, the guilt, the karmic vows of suffering you made in moments of pain. Forgiveness is not a religious virtue. It is a mechanical necessity. It is the act of cutting the energetic cords that drain your battery. You cannot ascend to the frequency of health if you are weighed down by the anchor of the past. You must choose. Do you want to be right about your pain, or do you want to be free? This channel does not exist to comfort you. Comfort is the anesthesia of the soul. We exist to disturb you into awakening. If you have listened to the story of James Mitchell and heard only science fiction, then you may return to your slumber. The Matrix has a warm bed waiting for you, and the pharmaceutical companies have a pill for every dream you wish to suppress. But if you are still here, if you felt a shiver run down your spine, if you felt a sudden, inexplicable recognition in your chest, then this message was for you. You are not a biological accident. You are an energetic titan suffering from amnesia. You have been told that you are small, that you are fragile, and that your health is a lottery ticket. This is the greatest lie ever told. You are the architect of your own vessel. If you are sick, if you are tired, if you are broken, stop looking at the sky for a savior. Stop looking at your doctor for permission to heal. The savior you are waiting for is staring at you in the mirror. The medicine you need is not in a bottle. It is in the frequency of your own consciousness. You have the power to rewrite your DNA. You have the power to command your cells. But first, you must make the terrifying choice to take full responsibility for your existence. The universe is listening. The field is waiting for your command. Are you going to broadcast the static of a victim or the symphony of a creator? The choice is yours. And remember, your health is not in the hands of the medical system. It is in the frequency you choose to vibrate. Tune in, wake up, and never go back to sleep.